forum, which is so good.
Great, thank you, Janine. Welcome everyone to the January 2025, change that on the page. Meeting of Waterfront Parks and Environment Committee for Manhattan CB4. I'm Leslie Murphy, co-chair. Marty the Cat online there. You see him in the boxes. The other co-chair. MCB4 has a hybrid policy that can be found on our website. Board members are expected to attend meetings in person unless they have a disability and or an extraordinary circumstance. Excused members and members of the public will still be able to participate virtually. Members who are joining via Zoom must leave their cameras on. This meeting is being streamed live on our YouTube channel and a transcript is being recorded for everyone to look at in perpetuity. We have 3 agenda items today, everybody. By the way, Happy New Year. Welcome back from vacation, I guess, because it's our first WP meeting from the holidays. And I do see that our first agenda item, which is usually always our first agenda item, which is New York Parks to provide an update. I do see that Paul is on. Let me get this to speaker. Hi, Paul, can you hear me? Paul Evans from Parks, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm good. I can hear you, you can hear me, I'm unmuted. I always have trouble unmuting myself.
So welcome to our first meeting for 2025.
Yes, Happy New Year, everybody.
Take it away.
Okay, I have a very, very short, report today. Mixed feelings, the cold weather slows things down. So all of the things that make us crazy and hectic are kind of slowed down a little bit, but we did have some snow and some ice. So we're kind of keeping things de-iced. And also the staff has to do their work and they have to, be safe. So the cold weather makes it very, very difficult. But we are in January. So that means the agency's usual big after Christmas event, Mulch Fest, is coming. Mulch Fest is coming up this weekend. The collection site for Christmas trees. I mean, people leave trees at every public park, but the official collection site in Community Board 4, District 4, is DeWitt Clinton. It's in the back by the handball courts. We have a nice pile of trees there. The press event is going to be this weekend. It's both Saturday. It's both Saturday and Sunday at Marcus Garvey between I believe it's 10 and 2, and I will be in attendance. I'm not hosting the event, but I will be there. But that event is normally there's some other giveaways and goodies, and maybe there's hot cocoa to keep people in a very, very festive mood in the middle of January. So that's my very brief report, and I'm very, very happy to have your questions. If I could answer right now or take them back to the borough office, I'd be pleased to do so.
Great, thank you for coming tonight, Paul. And I know we have a few questions about specific parks, but I'll go around the room first.
Hi, it's Lisa David. I had a question about the Christmas trees. I know I read that in addition, that unlike past years where there were specific dates that the trees would get picked up, that they also got picked up during recycling days. And I put mine out really quickly the day after Christmas, and it got picked up on that Saturday. Did those go to the mulch place, or did they go somewhere else?
No, so your sanitation also picks up Christmas trees. I'm not really sure what their collection days are. I know that in previous years they had a date for Christmas trees, but maybe they now are picking them up on recycling days, which actually makes sense. But those trees are also recycled. They're all the Christmas trees the city of New York picks up, either by sanitation or by parks. We do recycle them. We do chip them into wood chip mulch. I don't know if sanitation uses it for compost or has it as mulch, but they are disposed of in an environmentally friendly way.
Okay, thanks.
Leslie, can I just add?
Yeah, Katie's just gonna follow up on that.
So just from the sanitation side, in previous years, they had something called a tree truck, where they had one specific truck in the district that would only pick up the trees. Now that curbside composting is citywide, they are having the trees put out on your recycling day, which is also your compost day. And those trees will be picked up with compost, They will not be mulch, but they will go to Newtown Creek for bio, whatever.
Okay.
Yeah.
They're composted.
Yeah.
Anyone else for Paul? No, Paul, I just have one or two questions. Can you just give us an update for Matthews Palmer?
If you hadn't asked that, I would have.
Well, when you say the update, what I will tell you is, so basketball courts are open. The notorious scaffolding is down. The basketball courts are open, and what remains to be done for the basketball courts is the formal repair of the divots that were created by the scaffolding that was up. So we at Parks have done a temporary fix. We filled them in so that they're not trip hazards. But what is to come in the coming weeks, as we go into the spring, and I do believe that they have been given a recent reminder about this. The contractor has been told that ultimately they have to, do the formal fix of those irregularities. So that's where that actually stands, and it's so far we're on track with them.
What does on track mean? Like, do you know when they're gonna? Do you have any idea? Like when the weather gets a little warmer, like are we waiting for spring, or did they give you any feedback?
I don't have a date or a schedule, so I will have to get that for you. But let me just say this: at this moment, I am not worried. I think that things are well in hand as far as that goes. It is also, bear in mind, it is January. It's very, very cold. Can't pour asphalt, so things can't be done. So we're, I think we're on track.
Okay, that sounds good. My other question is on McCaffrey.
Yes.
Any updates? I know we sent a letter recently on McCaffrey on some different maybe possible solutions or suggestions. And I just want to know if anything has been done there or what's the line of thinking in Parks office about that?
I don't think there isn't a formal response that I'm aware of. I know that internally I've been speaking very informally about how we might deal with some of the staffing. There might be some opportunities coming up in the spring. What I will say is, when I said that the cold weather has kind of cooled some things down, McCaffrey's one of those places where all of that, the large gatherings are not happening. I mean, there are still a few of the deliveristas there. I did have a concern that some of them were like malingering in the bathrooms there. They're not supposed to do that. But I will say that in a very constructive way, NYPD is on the scene, and they are keeping any of that kind of behavior under control. So I've mentioned to them, it may sound unkind, but the guys really can't malinger in the bathrooms, and they said that they understood that, so they're keeping an eye on that. So I think those issues are good. We're still working on the edits for the documentation to be shared with the community, but that is coming. I actually had revisited the conversation with Max this afternoon, and we have another item we're going to add as well. So I think the very, very big visual problem, the visual concerns are kind of slowed down for the winter, and I think that we are also on track to resolve the rest of them and act on some of the things that were described as we come into the spring.
And I don't know this, some people here might know this, is Midtown South still patrolling there in this cold weather? My
understanding, yes, is that they are. Yes, I saw them there. I had a short week this week, but when I was there last week, and they were on it. They're keeping an eye on it. Yes.
And my second question is, I know there was talk about moving the bike racks that you guys installed up a little east, I guess it would be, so it's away from that blockage of the entrance. Was there any talk of that?
The one that remains, the one that remains up against, right adjacent to the fence, has not been moved yet. But yes, that one is definitely in my sights to be moved further up the block. And
a little better flow, maybe.
I mean, because what it does is it creates a congestion point, because you have bikes right at the So and I'm glad that that I think I sense more of an agreement that this is actually solving the problem of the bicycles, because I believe that it does. And also because the message has gotten out to the deliveristas that they really can't just crowd the entranceway. So I think between the weather and the communication, and also making the bike racks, available where they can use them. We've gotten rid of that congestion problem. But no, that other one has not been moved. It will be moved. It is definitely in our sights to be moved. Yes.
You bring up a good point. I mean, it's very cold, so no one's, in a few months, that's gonna change.
Yes.
And it's gonna be
Yes.
a different, so, problems aren't necessarily solved, it's just temporarily put on hold, only because it's absolutely freezing there.
Yes.
But that, and my third thing is, this will probably be maybe in this year on our sites, the Chelsea Park dog run, which was always kind of deemed temporary, I guess. Is there any vision or talk about making that permanent and making improvements to it as a permanent dog run?
That's a question I'll have to research. I don't know. I know that it is temporary. We're going to see how it works, and so I know that the community. I know that the dog community, they want a lot of different amenities, but I don't know. I'll tell you the truth. I don't know. I haven't been in contact with anybody who is actively a member of like the Dog Run Association, so I really don't know where the community's head is at. As far as actively participating and making those improvements or contributing, or what their official desires are. So there's more to come on that as well. I know that I heard somebody said dog run today in the office. So I'll get you some more information on that as well. That is I know a very timely question.
Okay, thank you, Paul. And on that, so when we advocated for that change and kind of this situation, do you think is Parks thinking overall it's successful, it's good in that place, we're keeping it in that? I'm just curious because we really haven't touched base on the quote unquote outcome of that decision making. So,
well, I have my own personal feelings. I don't know what I really can't say what the agency's assessment is of the success of the dog run. What I will say to you is this: there are still people who go onto the field. And there are people, take their dogs where they're not supposed to go. They don't use the dog run, and it's obvious it's a dog run there. So, so if you were to ask me, I'd say, well, it's going to be, mixed or not positive if people aren't, still going on the field. So, I think the formal answer has to come from someone other than myself. I have some, I'm not happy whenever I have to chase somebody off the field. So, I'm a little bit maybe a little bit biased in that respect. So it's mixed. I will say this: people who use it.
I was asking more, not necessarily, but more where it was, the location, the complaints, the how much it's being used. Positive feedback. I just wanted to know where you were.
Okay, well, let me just say this then. I don't think I've heard any complaints about noise about dogs barking. I think in that respect, I have to admit that's very successful. I think it is well cited in that regard. The other issues about does everybody use it consistently and keep people off the field? No, it does not. So we'd have to, I think, internally at the agency have a discussion as to how successful we really think it is, totally on tally considering everything. But I think the previous location, Penn South, very controversial, very problematic. Those problems do not exist at this location. So.
And my last question is, where are we at Penn South Playground?
As far as the capital.
Yeah.
We'd have to also get back on that as well, because I should have looked it up on Capital Tracker. I'd have to find out exactly where we are officially, and I will get that information for you.
Okay, thank you very much. Raul has a question for you.
Paul, thank you for your updates. I'm wondering if your department has had any discussion regarding the disconnect between PEP officers' shifts ending somewhere around 6 or 7 p.m. and therefore your maintenance people are the ones who actually have the responsibility of closing the parks. And that since they're not officers of any kind, there's a difficulty in getting that done sometimes. And has there been any discussion about changing that around somehow to have the PEP officers be the ones who close the parks?
There has been some discussion about that, but I will say there has been discussion about that, especially for locations that are very challenging. I think the real issue has always been staff numbers. There really aren't that many PEP officers, and they'd have to be scheduled in. The other issue sometimes is also, even though there's like a window during which a time that we lock up, sometimes there are delays, and so schedules have to be, would have to be coordinated. But there has been discussion about PEP participating officially in the lockup. But I also want you to know that historically, maintenance and operations has always locked up the parks and and playgrounds, and there's always been that problem. So it's not like a new disconnect. I think the real challenge at this time has been the change, maybe the dwindling of the numbers. I don't know what the PEP numbers have been historically, but like the members of the community board, I was surprised to know how few PEP officers there were assigned to the southern part of Manhattan. So that is very much a concern, given places like McCaffrey Playground, for example. So yes, so it is something that's being talked about and considered. It's not a disconnect. We are aware of it, and we are talking about it and trying to find solutions.
Anyone else for Park? No. Oh wait, I think you have a question about Clinton. The way Clinton and the lock on the east side, the gate. Has that been? I know you asked them that before.
Yeah.
Was that rectified or?
I don't think
Oh,
so.
Paul might have something.
Was
Yeah,
this?
well, I talked a few months ago about opening up the eastern gate onto Clinton Park to allow access
Yes,
to the field without having to go to the west side.
I understand. Well, I will tell you that we started locking that gate, the one that's basically at 53rd Street. We started locking it because errant dog owners would sneak in and sneak out through that gate to get onto the field. So unfortunately, I have to tell you, I'm going to keep it locked.
Oh, that's dog owners. You don't like us dog owners, really?
I love dog owners. I love all the dog owners who follow park rules and use dog runs when they are available as they're supposed to.
So I'm sorry, go ahead. You were responding to Matt's question. Did I mean to interrupt you?
No, did I say?
It's just it's not gonna open again.
It's not gonna open.
It's yeah. And until the dog situation really improves permanently, I'm afraid it has to stay closed.
Would it be possible if, instead of having like an east or west entrance, could there be a north or south? So you don't have to go all the way to the opposite side? Like just install a new entrance, maybe on the north side, which is away from the dog run?
So where are you when you say, so wait a minute, so where are you proposing? You're proposing along that would run parallel.
Along the 54th Street side.
All right.
North side of the park.
All right, so that is something. Okay, so let me just say this: creating an additional entrance that might be something that's possible if there's a new capital project that deals with fencing. We can consider that. But the real issue, is like sneaking in. That's something to consider. Something to consider.
This is a crazy idea, but I know they have it at the skate park up here, 62, 63. They have like a turnstile like you have at the subway. And
Yes.
Small dogs you can probably pick up and get through, but that would hopefully prevent larger dogs. Is that an option?
Well, let me just say this: that's as we consider different entrance options. I'll tell you the truth. I actually thought turnstile would be a good idea, actually for helping with locking up the park, because DeWitt is one of the parks that we actually don't lock. We leave the park open, but we lock the field and the bathrooms. We lock the playground. We lock the bathrooms, and we lock the field. But the park is open, and so one of the things that I wanted to do, because another community resident also made the same recommendation, was to put in a turnstile, so that way we could lock the gates, and the people who just refused to leave or wouldn't leave could still get out through the turnstiles, which were made people to exit. So what I will say is this: when there's an opportunity to discuss improvements to the fencing, I'm definitely going to recommend maybe some additional entrances that can respond to that. But once again, the issue, my reason for locking the gates that are locked is because of community behavior. It's in response to community behavior. So we would have to see, but I will definitely consider that, both of those suggestions: an additional gate, another one at least on 54th Street, and also possibility of different types of gates, perhaps even a turnstile. Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else? No? Great. Thank you so much, Paul.
Welcome.
Happy New Year, Paul.
Thank you very much. Same to you.
Great. Thank you. Let's go to our second item agenda. The EDC 2 months in a row. Look at you guys. It's a big track record. Are here to present on, so as we all know, the Manhattan Cruise Ship, the EDC has put out a grand master plan process, workshop process, for the Manhattan Cruise Ship Terminal. We have commented on that extensively. We are sending letters, and we all know how we feel in general and how it associates with shore power. But this is a greater master plan to include a lot of other elements of that area, and what is, I guess, a priority not only for EDC in that area economically, but also for the community. And I guess, so what they did was, and I attended, it was December 3rd. I think it was December 3rd. They started their public workshops. And the public came and they saw maps and there was a presentation, and they kind of wanted feedback from everyone on the community, people who were there. What is important to you? What do you want to, see here? I know our initial concern was that the shore power element or priority would be extremely diluted by this, because then you get people talking about little things, here and there, and then that overtakes the conversation, like this has to be moved, 5 feet this way, which is good too. But we definitely want to have our priorities pretty much set in stone, which I think they're aware of. But they are here to present kind of, I guess, what you guys did December 3rd, a little bit, so that we can have comment and then have a continuous dialogue. So take it away.
Real quick about the tech stuff. Janine, can I send you the presentation?
Oh, Janine, do you have the presentation? Yes, thank you. You guys can get up. Yeah, get up and.
All right, hi everyone. Thank you so much for having us back and happy New Year. I know I don't have to present myself, but I'm Clara Doss from the EDC's Government and Human Relations team. We have a deeper bench today. We have Allison Dees, who was virtually with us last month. She's the vice president of our cruise portfolio. Jackie Tang, who's an assistant vice president of our development team, and project managing the master plan process. We're also joined by Hatch, who's our consultant for this project. So Joshua Nelson, who is leading that effort, as well as Lester Robbins. So as Leslie fantastically set us up for, Manhattan Cruise Terminal Master Plan is really our way of unifying a lot of the different processes that we've been going through, that we've given you different updates on. So shore power feasibility study that we did, the Pier 90 extension, apron extension analysis on the traffic elements that have been there but haven't been connected to everything else. And our reason for this is so that we can be comprehensively planning for the future. We want to make sure that the Manhattan Cruise Terminal is a better neighbor to this community. We want to make sure that shore power is there, but we also want to improve the traffic conditions, improve the way that someone on the Greenway riding their bike is being able to pass by the cruise passengers spilling out from the terminal, and just make this a much more integrated site overall. So this master plan process is really getting at that. So we'll walk through an overview of that process through tonight that we presented at the first workshop. We'll also go over a little bit of the questions that we asked, and would love to hear your answers to those questions too, especially if you weren't able to join us. And we'll also share some of the initial feedback that we got from that first workshop, so that you are up to date with all the information that we have from public feedback through this process so far, and can come to our next workshop with us. I'll pass it to Josh to lead us through.
Absolutely. And if I need a slide advance, okay, I'll let you know. So thank you very much for the opportunity. My name is Joshua Nelson. I'm a transportation planner here in New York City with Hatch. I've been a New Yorker for about 18 years now, and specializing in the ports and terminals space. So Hatch has a practice specifically dedicated to ports and terminals, based out of our office in downtown Brooklyn. So on the next slide, I'll just introduce you a little bit to Hatch, kind of who we are and where our expertise lies in the ports and terminals space. And one of our specialties is master planning work. Very, very familiar with the Port of New York and New Jersey. Hatch was selected by the Port Authority to conduct a 3-year project for their 30-year master plan. And whether it's a large facility like the Port of New York and New Jersey, around 3,000 plus acres, or a much smaller facility, a small marine terminal or a small ferry terminal, for example, we have that master planning lens and we can apply that. So you see a long list of ports, some of which, their I realize ports are a little esoteric, so you may not recognize the Port of New South Wales. Certainly the Port of Philadelphia, just last month, released their master plan, a 15-year master plan, taking a look at growth there, and that was some of the work that we did there. So definitely have that expertise and bring that process and oversight to the master planning effort here at MCT, which I'll walk you through. And next slide, please. Just a little bit about our team. So I mentioned Hatch as the prime consultant for this effort. But we're also leveraging some other partners that are extremely important to us. One is Romano Achino and Partners. Premier cruise terminal architect firm. They do worldwide cruise terminal planning and architecture. So very integrated and very involved, connected to the cruise industry. Our strategy is helping us with stakeholder outreach. Those of you, I know a few of you were able to attend public workshop number 1. Our strategies team was there in force and helping move forward that stakeholder engagement component. They'll be there again with us for public workshop number 2. GPI and Wolfert helping us with general infrastructure planning, looking at traffic, data collection, and then offering the solutions for potential mitigations that may be associated with the future plan. How do we begin to correct some of the major challenges that we know exist at the cruise terminal, both in terms of the public infrastructure and realm perspective, but also from a safety perspective, which is of critical importance to us. So just to give you a sense of the full team, next time we meet in public workshop number 2. So public workshop number 1 was just our strategies and Hatch team. We'll bring the GPI team and the VA team, the Romano Achino team there as well to be able to walk us through the exercises that will be in public workshop 2, which I'll preview towards the end of the presentation. On the next slide, just want to talk a little bit about what is a master plan, how do we view master planning. We've got another slide about what a master plan is not, right? In the context of this, a master plan is essentially a holistic framework. Tara mentioned really taking a look at stitching together what to date have been separate or disparate components in the overall view of what MCT should be, and putting them all together to ensure that over the planning horizon for the master plan, there's a fulsome view on what's needed to ensure that we're making decisions that are important and long lasting for the future. You may know, marine infrastructure has a long life, and a lot of what's out there in the configuration that you see there has many, many decades of use. And we want to plan wisely, using obviously public and private funds where possible to think about what that future program should look like, to make sure that we're planning not for just 10 years out, but for, in this case, 30 years out. How do we take a look at that planning horizon and what's that mean? So there's several components that are part of that. The first is just a baseline assessment, making sure that we understand as a consultant team what the lay of the land is with respect to infrastructure, commercial agreements, understanding what operations are in any other plans that are in the works. And then looking at market opportunities, understanding, where is the industry headed, where is the potential demand, and how do we begin to think about that in terms of infrastructure needs and overall impacts to the neighborhood. And then taking a look at the opportunities that create positive outcomes from a development perspective. Really, it's about infrastructure options. It's taking a look at potential interventions, all again with that wide lens of taking and stitching together, the disparate elements that we've described previously, and making sure that we have that viewpoint, so that we can guide future infrastructure development. On the next slide, we'll tell you what a master plan is not. And I think it's an important distinction, and there's two pieces to it. A master plan from the Hatch perspective is not an ironclad absolute, right? We build these master plans so that they have the opportunity for pivot points. That is to ensure that the master plan doesn't end up on a shelf and is suddenly unuseful if some circumstance changes, as far as that's concerned. Just thinking through optionality as far as the future is well. If you're familiar, if you take a look at the Port Authority master plan, for example, a major pivot point for them they discovered was in about 15 years. That's when all of the existing infrastructure of the port is going to be at capacity. And the port has a huge decision to make, and that is either to say, hey, we're good, and cap that volume, or alternatively, we're going to need to work to accommodate that additional volume. How do we do that? And so the plan looked at both of those options, right? And what that meant for them. So they had that optionality rather than essentially trying to cast everything in stone. The second part of what it isn't, a vote in the city, there you go. It is not a marketing plan. It's not a business plan. It's not an engineering design effort, right? All of the stuff that you see here, that is what a master plan unlocks. That is what a master plan helps to enable. So that once the overall master plan is put together, we understand what the infrastructure interventions would be, or the potential operations would need to be, then you start to develop those plans and move forward. That's when you get a good sense for exactly what the engineering, like detailed design documents, right? You're going to hand something to someone to build. That's not in the master plan. You won't see that featured in what we do. But that is, again, this is the first step in that long process to ensure that the holistic vision is there to enable all of those pieces. On the next slide, I'll just talk about the general study area. Advance to the next slide. There you go. So this is the general study area for the master plan, which you see here highlighted in yellow. And for those of you that were at Public Workshop 1, this is very familiar to what we presented there. But it essentially comprises the extent of the Manhattan Cruise Terminal, and that includes piers 88, 90, and 92. The piers here house critical infrastructure that is tied to the safe berthing of vessels. So it includes the pier infrastructure itself, aprons, bollards, all of the infrastructure that's necessary to enable that activity. Passenger boarding bridges, similar to an airplane, when you get off an airplane and use that jetway. Similar process here for the cruise terminal, you need the ability to get off the vessel and into the terminal itself. And then it also houses all of the important interior infrastructure, right? The ability to accommodate passengers. That's embark and debark areas, security screening, the customs and border protection activities that take place in those federal inspection stations. So some cruise ships arrive from foreign countries, right? And those passengers that do arrive, just as if you were to arrive on an international flight and you would need to go through customs inspection, passengers on a cruise ship would need to go through that as well. So passengers, the crew from the ships as well, accommodating also the terminal operators. Some of you at Public Workshop number 1 got to meet some of the stevedores that actually work on the docks. That's in International Longshoremen Association. We had some representation from the ILA. We also got to meet the folks from Intercruises. There was, at least at my table, one individual from Intercruises who is part of the check-in staff that welcomed cruise passengers in, walked them through the full check-in operation, and handled the activities there. So we've got crew, passengers, and then the other important thing that happens at the terminal is the provisioning of vessels. So when a cruise ship comes in, generally speaking, that ship will take on food, that ship will take on water, other necessary amenities, whichever they may be. It's a pretty standard practice. Most of the ships that come into New York City are not visiting on a longer cruise. Most people, those cruise ships, they're starting and ending their cruises in New York. So it's local folks in New York and the general tri-state area that are taking advantage of those cruises. Less than 10% are cruises where the vessel is stopping in New York City as a port of call. We do get those, and those are interesting opportunities a lot of times in the fall, where you'll have a vessel that starts in Baltimore and works its way to New York City, Boston, etc. And it's one of the few stops. So they might stay overnight, give people an opportunity to go into the city, see the show, everything. One of the things that's important to note here is the configuration of the terminal. Some of you may know the history of the terminal, but it dates back from the mid-30s. The terminal was constructed, surprise, when ocean liners were getting bigger. And so, and you can't see it here on this map, but we did illustrate it in the public workshop. You'll note the bulkhead line as you're heading north along Hudson. You'll see it bows in and then it comes back out. And that's essentially the city's decision was to take land out and create new space for those larger vessels. We all know the days of the ocean liner have now transitioned to the day of the modern cruise ship, and it's a very different animal. Larger vessels, they're going on shorter turns. No one's going on, 10, 20-day crossings across the Atlantic and down to South America and all that stuff. But looking at 3, 4, 5, and potentially, 7, sometimes a little bit longer itineraries that are out there. But what we recognize is this configuration is not serving that new model well. The terminal has done a fantastic job of taking advantage of everything that it has in order to be successful. But nevertheless, that's one of the things that's important to highlight. So when we take a look at all of the infrastructure that's in there, we then combine it with the impacts. And we recognize the challenges that are associated with the terminal, both in terms of public realm and public access, but also in terms of the adverse impacts that active vessel operations generally have on the Greenway, on the West Side Highway, etc. And that's really when you see those vessels come in, you'll have a very large number of passengers who are disembarking those vessels and looking to catch for-hire vehicles, taxis, walking into Midtown with luggage, etc., to either extend their stay in New York City. Impacts on Greenway, for example, when that happens. I know many of you are very familiar with that, and the understanding of the plan and the holistic view is how do we mitigate that, right? And I think that the other component to highlight that's very, very important, which I know is important to you all, it's important to EDC, and it's important to the industry, is the implementation of shore power. And in our outreach, you'll talk a little bit about that. This is a very important piece for very, very interested in mandates to make sure that they're complying with that wherever they can. I think it's very important. So the master plan generally, holistic opportunity to take a look at public realm and the interactivity between the public space and cruise operations. Cruise infrastructure, very important. Market demand, I mentioned that previously, taking a look at what the market is for cruise in New York City specifically. Traffic and transportation, looking to improve safety and create a more friendly interface there. And then environmental impacts, right? So shore power. So that gives you kind of a sense of the major key components that will be incorporated into the plan itself. And as I said, the spillover effects, even though you see this boundary here, rest assured that 12th Avenue and the associated impacts there are being incorporated into that master planning process. On the next slide, the other key piece of this is all of you, right? And all of our stakeholders who are part of the project. And you'll see here, key stakeholders include, of course, our interface with EDC as our key client and making sure that we're incorporating their interests and needs. The public generally, that's part of those public workshops that we have created as an opportunity to directly interface with the public. We have 3 public workshops that are part of the overall engagement. As mentioned, public workshop number 1 held in early December, the second one coming towards the end of the month, and then in March we expect to have our 3rd public workshop. Technical advisors, those include our cruise line partners primarily, right? The folks who use the terminal day in and day out, as well as our terminal operator. Books America, so that's the firm that does operate the criminal, the stevedores and others that they hire, and manage vessel operations on that side. And then community board and elected officials, and so key component of that, that's why we're here tonight. And we want to make sure that we are having an open and direct dialogue with you all, with respect to a very open master plan, questions you may have, et cetera. In terms of process on stakeholders on the next slide, we've identified a couple of things. You don't mind switching to the next slide? There we go. Other elements that supplement that public engagement include the survey, which we'll have a link to toward the end of the presentation, online survey for folks to take, and a number of interviews. And we've got a highlight of what those are. The important thing to note here is that as a part of the process, we weigh all this information equally. It's not that an interview with the cruise line is going to carry more weight than a public workshop, for example. It's all about intake and input and quality of the information that we're receiving so that we can incorporate that into the plan moving forward. Just a little bit about, and this was important for us to share with the public in the public workshop, right? Our tenets of how we're going to, the principles that we're going to be using in collaboration with others. And we said this to the folks in the public workshop, and I'll say it, to you as well, and I know it's important to all of you, but your feedback is vital. It's very important. We really encourage you to come to public workshop number 2. We'll be diving in more deeply on the public realm.
Looks like the meeting dropped off.
Oh, yeah, we lost the.
Marty, you look good. Janine, is she on?
She dropped off.
Oh, she may have dropped
She
off.
may have lost her connection.
I'll keep going. She's probably
Yeah.
dropped off and she'll show you back.
Okay, no worries. Yeah, I can speak to some of the stuff here that we got. No problem. And you'll have this presentation, obviously, or you do, I'm sorry, you do have it. So you'll note that the timeline and what we described. So the next big step is public workshop number 2, happening on the 28th. And then we'll have public workshop number 3 following that. The interviews that I described are ongoing, right? And in terms of folks that we've interviewed already, we have a list here. Hudson River Park Trust, the Times Square Alliance, the HYHK Alliance, all of the cruise lines, so the major partners. So, you've probably heard those names before, but Carnival Corporation, for example, MSC Cruises, Norwegian Cruise Line, and even Royal Caribbean, who does not primarily fall in Manhattan, but an important stakeholder in the harbor generally. Local, state, federal folks, and we'll continue with those interviews throughout the year.
Hey, Janine, can you just put back the presentation?
Yeah, I'm really sorry. I moved to a different area, so it should be better.
While you're doing that, are any of the workshops accessible like virtually, or will they all be in person?
So the next one will be in person. We do have a survey that's open as well, so for anybody who can't attend the workshop, and give general feedback, there's also that opportunity. But yeah, the next one will be.
Yeah, excuse me, a lot of it in the interactive, and workshop number 1. So, I think you mentioned that the maps and other things are super helpful to be able to just point, this is what I'm talking about, this is the issue I'm concerned about. It's somewhat harder to do in a virtual setting, so we recognize that. We did provide that online survey as an alternative. So if you don't mind moving to the next slide, this will have that timeline that I mentioned. One note, we'll have that QR code for you. We're keeping that survey open for the end of the month. So we'll plug it again in public workshop number 2, and then we'll put it over some folks in additional time to reply. And if you haven't, we'd encourage you to do it. It's just always good to have a plurality of voices and perspectives. I think the interesting thing for us as a team in public workshop number 1 was not only to have the community there, but as I mentioned, have the folks that work at the cruise terminal day in and day out also there and representing their perspective on the future of the terminal itself. And spring 2025 is when we anticipate having the master plan published. So there's still quite a bit of work to do, right, in terms of the overall plan itself. next slide, I'll walk through a little bit about public workshop number one. So, just the structure of the workshop generally, give you a sense of what that looked like. We did do a kickoff and a little bit of table setting, but the presentation is very, very similar to this. And then engaged in small breakout groups and solicited input on some of these are some of the questions. We're quite a long list. We consolidated this just for the slide to give you a sense of what we were asking. And really, as mentioned earlier, it was about what is your experience with MCT? What is your interface with the terminal? What's your experience in terms of traffic impacts for people? Any challenges you face specifically with respect to the terminal itself? What would you like to see? What's important and what's of value to you? And on the following slide, we've got a high-level summary of a lot of the feedback. One that, very important for us to know, implement shore power, loud and clear. And again, that will be incorporated into the master plan without a doubt. But looking at really a lot of the public interface components that I had mentioned previously, looking at pedestrian and cycling safety on 12th Avenue, a general decongestion of MCT. And, I'll be honest, I think we're going to work our process to ensure to mitigate this as much as possible. Is it hard to make an 6,000 passengers cruise ship just feel like nothing in New York City? Might be challenging. That's the kind of stuff that we're really working with to make sure we have a great opportunity here with the master plan to incorporate that as much as possible. Increase public access to MCT. I'll tell you now, there are some challenges with respect to security requirements. In the same way at an airport, you're not able to walk right up and touch the plane. Same with the cruise ship, right? There are MARSEC and security protocols in place. That is not to say, however, that we can't look at public access. And there's some interesting case studies we'll review in public workshop number 2 to look at how different cruise terminals have accommodated that and what we might be able to consider as far as that's concerned. And then strengthening transit connections from MCT to Midtown. And that I think is both in service of the community in general, but also in the service of potential cruise passengers who might opt to take transit. If it's there, if they're aware of what it is, the opportunity to take advantage of that is easy for them as they come off those vessels. I think that is it with respect to the formal presentation. I think on the next slide, we do have a QR code for the online survey. So, if you haven't yet taken advantage of that, yeah, please do. Give folks a second to grab them on your phones. And share that with, other members of the community that, would be interested in that and taking advantage of that. And so happy to open it up. So, I mentioned public workshop number 2. We love that a lot. We hope to see a lot of you there as a part of that work. And happy to open it up to questions. If anybody has comments in reaction to some of the questions, we have public workshop number 1. Questions on process of the plan itself, etc. We're happy to.
So I'm gonna, as usually, go to the committee first. And we can not only ask questions, but I think offer up some, like they did at the master plan. They offer suggestions, and then we'll take like a running tab, because I do foresee a letter coming out of this agenda item. But I'll go around the room. Roberta, I saw your hand first, so go ahead.
So I guess the first question, and apologies if this has been answered. Why is a master plan necessary? I understand you explained what a master plan is, why it is useful here, but why is EDC undertaking a master plan? And is there a reason why concurrent activities such as shore power or adding shore power could not be occurring simultaneously as the creation of master plan? If you could explain those things.
Yeah, it's a good question, right? I think because some of what will come out of the master plan may include major infrastructure changes. The implementation of shore power, for example, may be associated with a pier that is not going to be there in the master plan, or there may be a reconfiguration. Or one of the things that I highlighted is that the pier configuration, as indicated right now, presents challenges for the industry. The other piece is ensuring if any decision we make on the infrastructure there will have impacts in terms of passenger volumes and where it's coming out. And so we want to make sure that we're stitching that together in a holistic manner to install shore power now, for example, is challenging with, for example, as I said, that infrastructure is going to be changing. And that's where we've got a 30-year horizon. That's not to say, and I recognize we say it's a 30-year master plan. It's not so that something gets done in year 30, but rather how do we map that out so we're making wise decisions with respect to overall operations and infrastructure, but also public funding. And making sure that we're using those tax dollars wisely, and the city is promoting and offering that infrastructure in a way that stitches together more holistically with the different projects that were described, like shore power, the period of heating for extension. And a lot of what hasn't been addressed, which is that public interface.
To add to that though, as part of this, we're looking at, for example, the traffic piece, we're doing activities on that. And for some of those pieces, there's a possibility for some short-term solutions there, especially. So this is not to say that no action is happening until we have this idea of how everything is coming together. But there is an opportunity for us to understand, as part of this process, what are some of those short-term interventions, especially for things like traffic mitigation.
Is there any sort of legal requirement that EDC do this, or is this EDC's like decision-making power, like to do this?
For the master plan, internally, this is our
Decision.
Can I start with something over there? Just because I don't want to make this into a short power meeting, because you already know our views on that, and you have our letters, and we'll get another one next week. I think that was just voted through. So I want this to be kind of the next step further, but since she mentioned shore power. No, it's okay. I'm glad, because there was one thing I just wanted to follow up in the picture is there are many steps, as you know, to shore power. It's not just the infrastructure that's on the pier, right? You have to go through Con Ed, you have to go underneath the highway or wherever you're gonna get it from. So what Roberta said, a lot of those things have nothing to do with the master plan. You know you're gonna get shore power, right? You know electricity physically has to get to the shore, to the pier, right? So I think we were asking for last month, I think it's included in our letter, that does not preclude you from starting that process, right? You can start that process, you can start talking with Con Ed, you can start building underneath and getting that infrastructure. Sure, if you're gonna move the actual plug on this pier or that pier or wherever, like you said, it depends on that's of course, that's gonna be the final step. But aren't there many other steps before that to get that infrastructure to there? That can be done regardless of what the plan is?
A little bit. I think also the master plan is really taking the shore power feasibility study, and it is, from the way we are approaching this, it is the next step to realize shore power. So the biggest thing that we are missing now is the substation. So we did the feasibility study, we went out to Con Ed and they said, yes, we think they will not make commitments until we have a low letter, and the low letter depends on the substation. But they've said the result of that study was like, yes, we do think that we can bring this amount of power to this general location of the city. And the next step is to figure out, where is that substation going? What is the size of the substation that it is needed, and where is it going? And that is going to be part of the master plan. When we finish this master plan, we will be able to see where we think that substation is going to go.
What is the so because we were told by Con Ed there was no necessary, like it's not a big substation.
Yeah.
Or am I wrong? Is it like what are you talking, like the substation you showed us on the pictures a few times ago? I remember someone asked, what is that strange looking thing? Or we're talking a substation that's like half a city block. What do you mean substation?
So the one at the Brooklyn Cruise Terminal is about a third of an acre. That's serving one ship. We would obviously be serving more ships here. We are anticipating that substation will need to be on one of these two piers in this new, that we'll see a schematic, design for out of the master plan. And then I think the other thing, I know Josh, you mentioned that the master plan is not a marketing tool. This is really, inland infrastructure is really expensive. I think in some ways, we actually do think of this as a necessary step towards bringing along grant money and public funding and private funding to help do this. And this is a document that will help us with the fundraising that we needed for shore power and for.
So there's no money right now.
Correct, there's no city capital, we're applying for federal grants, of course. And then we would expect private to also be in this.
On shore power or on something else?
Kind of.
Okay, because I want to do the shore power and get it out of the way, and then Roberta might have other.
It was just a follow-up on that.
Yeah,
So, when you talk about the Con Ed substations, there is an existing Con Ed substation on 49th Street. Do you know what that's used for? It takes up almost an entire city block. And that's literally across the highway from the cruise terminal.
So I don't want to speak out of turn because I'm not technical. I can draw on what I've learned from the Brooklyn Cruise Terminal, and that is that you look at that whole area and the neighborhood of Red Hook as an example. When we needed to bring in shore power there, Con Ed brought in a specific designated substation that was only for the cruise terminal. There was an outage, for example, 2 weeks ago, there was a fire in the manhole. The neighborhood was not impacted, the rest of the property, nothing around, the community, the residents were not impacted. But the ability to plug in for that day was until they.
The Intrepid have no power today.
Oh, yeah, they had a fire in the motor room.
So my understanding is they're getting shore power specific.
Okay. That was
we
my
can follow, we're
shore
gonna
power
follow,
question.
I'll offline this week, I'll follow with Con Ed on that. Hey, go ahead.
Just related to the substation,
Mhm.
when you cited the Brooklyn one, was there a like public land use review process? Or, I'm trying to,
Yeah.
it would be in this space.
Yeah, there was not, in that case, it was on property that was Port Authority.
Yeah,
So there's no city discretionary options.
and these are EDC peers,
These are city
peers. Okay, that would, I guess they wouldn't be too.
Go ahead.
How long do we anticipate this, process of the master planning part to take, and then the subsequent parts? Because I think just from one of the slides you mentioned, this is not. So what I inferred is, okay, then we need also another stream of planning for the engineering, the operations, all of that stuff. So how much is this part, and then what do we anticipate to be the next tranche of planning?
Yeah, I can speak at least to the master plan itself, and Tara made an important note about those short-term interventions that are part of the process. So right now, we're anticipating concluding the master plan in the spring. So, it's not a 3-year process like I described with the Port Authority here in New Jersey, obviously a much more discrete asset that's a part of that. So that would essentially then be the roadmap. And that may include those short-term interventions. Now, I think some of the questions about what comes next is related to funding and related to a commitment for having some of that, but I'll let EDC speak to what that might look like going forward.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. It's the deals that get struck to fund it, who the private parties are that are involved. Certainly city, and that's when you would get to a design, the technical design phase. So, I think we think of that as the implementation phase, starting on implementation, and that would be, it needs to be a funding phase and then implementation.
Yeah, I might piggyback. The one thing the master plan will do is sort of highlight what that phasing needs to look like from an infrastructure perspective. You think of a cruise terminal much in the same way you might think of a train station or an airport. Very, very rarely do you say we're closing the airport down while we make an extension or while we change infrastructure. So there is a bit of a puzzle piece that we'll need to play to ensure that there is continued operational throughput there during that process. So we will map that out as part of the master plan.
Matt?
2 questions. One is, I'm curious what the deliverable looks like in this master plan. Is it list of recommendations with alternatives and different scenarios that EDC can kind of pick and choose from? Is it a summary of the feedback from these workshops? Just what does that sort of look like when it's?
It's a little bit of both, right? It's a synthesis of all of that. I do think there will be a preferred alternative, right? So it's not gonna be here's sort of everything you could pick from, but rather here's what, both EDC and then taking in the synthesis from stakeholders, the community, the industry, et cetera, what that looks like. So you will see that reflected in the document itself. It will be very similar to, if you do get a chance, go to the PA's website and you can download that. You're not gonna see renderings of a cruise terminal, right? That's that next step. So just, an important note, but rather programmatically, how will MCT be laid out? Where do elements like the public realm and public access come into the terminal? Taking a look, and there are some indicative photos and case studies, that type of thing to give people a sense of what's being discussed as a part of that. Yeah, that's a good document. It's sort of like a guide for what's happening.
And then I know it's not part of sort of the scope that you're looking at, it's not part of the DC's property, but on Pier 94 that's currently under construction with Sunset Studios, I'm wondering how that is being incorporated into sort of your thinking about, the 30-year master plan and the activity that will eventually be happening on that. So,
That is EDC.
oh, the CBC as well, okay. But not part of the master plan, so.
Right, yeah, so since that's not part of the cruise terminal, that exists separately, but it's an important component, right? And as a neighbor, we want to understand exactly both their plans in terms of traffic volume and circulation, right? The greenway is getting rerouted in that certain area, and there's the viaduct, if you're familiar with the ramp that takes vehicular traffic up to both levels 2 and 3 of the cruise terminal in that area. So it will have to take into consideration those impacts. I don't think the intent is to adversely impact, but how can we further improve upon that circulation, the circulation revisions that they have there to continue to improve that interface between public and private.
And are you getting that? Is there a working relationship between that development and the master plan?
EDC definitely has a direct relationship with Tornado and the public team that are here.
Sally?
Hi, so I was at the first workshop, so I'm curious about the workshops 2 to 3. Many observations and priorities were set, like the bicycle paths and getting people to Midtown and all the things that you went through. Is the expectation of the following workshops that you'll get more affirmation of those needs, or are you looking for new ones? I mean, what is supposed to happen that didn't happen the first time?
Yeah, great question. I'll let you answer it, but yeah, I'm excited about 2 or 3 others.
Yeah, public workshop 1 was good. I think now we're going to drill into actual case studies to show you, as I mentioned, what other cruise terminals have done in terms of public realm and public access. Generally to gauge whether or not there's interest in some of those things, right? There is public parks, there are public parks. For an example, there's transitional spaces that, as I mentioned, from a security perspective, our cruise ship is in that area becomes a part of the working space for the terminal, but when the terminal ship is gone, it's suddenly accessible to the public. And it's threading that needle between, I think it's important for us to share with everyone what some of the limitations are. So that's a key component of what will get discussed in public workshop 2, those case studies. And then helping prioritize those specific interventions. That's one place that we didn't get right in public workshop 1. How important are these different elements? Safety for us is critical, top of the list. What are some of the other pieces of things that people want to see? So there'll be an exercise in the not dissimilar, where we're going to get people trying to help on their feet and talking a little bit more about what's most important to them and what would they like to see. And there's a series of interventions that sort of we could showcase, from a number of different examples that folks can get into. And then workshop number 3 will be sort of the readout of kind of, hey, here's what we heard, and here's where we're incorporating, and give you a better sense of how that's getting brought into the master plan.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
So upon completion of the master plan, will you then be able to begin working in earnest on the shore power design?
So that's, yeah, question.
Yeah, I think the phase before the technical phase is the funding, realizing that plan phase. We have already begun applying for grants, and we are already starting conversations about investment opportunities for parts of a realized terminal.
How long do you anticipate that phase will be?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that we're probably best to come back to you with answers on that as soon as the master plan give us a little bit more time. 2 months, I think, when we get closer to the end of the master plan. We'll be able to come back to you with timing, but I would say it's, the piers approaching the end of their useful life. We have full support as an agency right now, also at City Hall, but complete support as an agency, and from our perspective, it's like to go as fast as we possibly can. While we have certain things, aligned and priorities aligned on.
Okay, and last question, once the master plan is done and the funding is in place, how long will the design phase for the shore power be and then the implementation phase?
I think from the feasibility study, the design of something like that, I would say tends to take a year. And that would depend on what is the pier infrastructure that they're putting it into. But again, if we could come back to, but that's probably a good estimate.
Yeah, I know this would risk wasting some money, but could you begin developing feasibility studies for some of the different alternatives? Let's say one of the alternatives assumes that one of the piers isn't going to be used, another one that is going to be,
Right.
or, different substation locations.
Right.
Is there a relatively small number of final solutions that you can envision from here and maybe begin doing some of the design work on?
I think, yes, I sort of think so. And the reason I say that is, I think even if it's not specific to MCT, we are, for example, we have shore power somewhere else, so we have a lot already in terms of systems that are needed. We know a lot about what's needed. We're currently in design right now with Watts Marine, who is a shore power provider. Who I think it would be willing to come to a meeting at some point and we can talk about some of this stuff. Not to say that we would necessarily use them, obviously we'll be doing open procurements, but we are, we know a lot about that and we know a lot about the design, and I was reviewing design drawings for our shore power earlier today. So I think some of that stuff can be replicated into other locations. So I would expect that we would be able to use some of that work here and or some of those learnings here in Manhattan.
Do you think you might be able to provide us with something like a critical path schedule or from where we are to where we might actually see it implemented?
I think let us get our scenario of what the master plan and the layout of future terminals will be, and then I expect we'd be coming back to you with more of that information.
Thank you.
I was intrigued, when you were talking about Philadelphia and the projections of volume of traffic and a decision to be made for Philadelphia. And I'm wondering if that is part of this for New York, and do you anticipate growth, either larger boats, more ships? What actually, is that part of the master plan?
It is, yeah, taking a look at that was that market, demand piece that I mentioned. So taking a look at, what the overall forecast for growth is, and I can say at this point, it's very robust. New York continues to be, I think what's, maybe just to step back a bit, New York is unique, in as much as there's such a huge population center, obviously around, the cruise terminal itself, and a large number of people who do not want to fly to, in Miami. Miami is the epicenter of cruise in the US, and then Fort Lauderdale, and then Tampa, and then Galveston, and then New York City, number 6. So it's surprising to a lot of people, but there's such a large center there, and so the demand in the industry itself is quite robust. globally, regionally, and locally as well.
Anything else?
Is there any thought of what goes into this terminal versus Brooklyn in terms of growth?
Well, Brooklyn is one berth right now. This here in Manhattan, there used to be 5. I don't know that it's 5 still fits, given the size of the ships here. But I would say it's more about what fits here than it is necessarily. What's happening.
Where it goes?
So, and then I see Lauren's hand is up.
I was struck by the part of your presentation that talked about what the master plan is not. It's not a business plan, it's not a marketing plan, it's not engineering studies. So at the end of it, we won't know how much this will cost, right?
No, there will be indicative costs. So high level indicative costs will be a part of the overall exercise and understanding of those impacts.
Oh.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay, so indicative, and are those indicative costs the fundraising that you're gonna do?
So that's a really critical piece for us to then take for a grant application. We need that, those costs,
Okay.
and it'll be, again, it's not a full operational plan or a design plan, but that is the first
The
step.
basis of your fundraising.
Applying.
Thank you, that clears up a lot.
Anyone else? Oh, Gwen, go ahead.
It doesn't sound like you have very much interaction, and it may just be the way that you were presenting it, but enough interaction, I should say, between the public users and the people who are making the decisions. I mean, if you're going to have one more workshop, that doesn't sound like that's gonna do it. I mean, you have some of the people here, you had it the first one, but that doesn't sound like very much input to me.
And I will say, one workshop is not the end, and the reason why we have 3, we have a survey, we're hoping to get, different types of input, as people are capable of doing. I think the thing that is, that does constrain us in terms of how much we can do is the time here. The peers are at the end of their useful life, and we want to make sure that we have this master plan in as soon as possible to be moving on to those next steps. So that's why.
I understand that, I've been through this.
Yeah, so I mean, that's why, at this rate, we have one workshop for a month and a half, given the holidays. We know there can always be more engagement and would love your support and any other suggestions you have for meetings we should be presenting at, or people we should be emailing, anything like that.
Well, any, of course, you want, any of your potential future people, if you want to talk to about what you're doing. But, there, people who are users sometimes have really different ideas than what you have, in an office writing down on a piece of paper. It could be crazy.
Anyone else in the room? Oh, Ellen.
Thank you. This really helps with the context when you said that this was designed in the 1930s. And you can only imagine, how different the ships look now versus then, and even just how they drive and. So I can see that we need to do this. I think that the board's struggle with kind of this was that we were going down this path. There's all these amazing infrastructure things happening around, Port Authority. We have the Gateway Tunnel, and we, have this massive infrastructure bill that was approved by Congress. So I thought, wow, we're gonna have all these funds in the greatest city in the world and have, shore power, where we live in the district with the dirtiest air in the entire, New York City. So we were so excited. And I think that I understand the need for this, but I think it just felt like such a gut punch for us to feel like, what, we're not getting shore power to get clean air for our community. And this feels like necessary work, but but it just felt like it also like made it feel like, oh, a delay in getting the, you know, the carbon offset stuff that we really need for our city. So I know it was just a long rant. I think for me, it's like, I want for us to have this world-class, like amazing, inspirational beacon, like, so I feel like about our MTA, I'm like, how does, like, even some Latin American cities have better subway systems than us, you know, like, I don't get it. Like, we should have the best in the world. Yet, I don't know, I get it, but it just, everything takes so long and it's just frustrating, but the kind of the transparency that you gave around the funding piece that we need to do fundraising tells me, okay, maybe this is why now of this master plan is because of that aspect.
I can also offer, we did apply for funding for shore power specifically in the last round of infrastructure grant funding. We did not receive any, but typically we have to apply a couple times. And we did not have the master plan and the finances of the master plan to help support that grant application. We also have already teed up with the city of these are our future city capital. So that is something that's an active conversation.
Definitely. We can't depend on grant funding. It
Well,
has to be budgeted. This is, I mean.
Well, we're talking about a scaled investment that will be, it will require private, it will require city capital, and then there will be, the original piers and most of our watershed infrastructure does also have federal funding associated with it. The ferry terminal right now does, but there is a large match from the city that the city will have to bring to this as well. And then we will of course be looking for private within this industry to contribute as well.
Great, I know Marty, go ahead, Marty.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Alice, for your rant. I really appreciate it. Makes it a little shorter for what I want to say.
It was Ella.
Huh?
Ella.
My bad. My bad. Thank you. I have to say I am unconvinced and disappointed with your answers about why shore power, even temporary shore power, needs to be delayed even for one pier. I, at a minimum, hope to see at the end of the 2-month period that this study goes on. I think that's what you said. It's a 2-month period for the study. That at the end of it, you will come back to us and say that temporary shore power for one of the piers will be installed within the next 2 years. Anything less than that seems to me to be unsatisfactory for our community.
Anyone else have a few things? One list of things, but I will start with the question. You guys, we have been in constant conversations with our state representatives who said that they would be willing to chip in possibly. Is that like a funding option on your, I mean, I'm sure it is on your list of, because when you gave us the Jacob study results and you listed each berth and getting shore power to that, it really was, I don't want to say laughable, and I'm sure it wasn't the full cost of it, but berth 1 was 15.4 million, berth 2 was 16.6 million. I don't know where those numbers came from, but this is from your PowerPoint.
I was just looking at it myself. I have it.
Yeah, so, I mean, even when I showed this to our state representatives, they actually laughed. And they said, this is nothing, this is not.
Yeah, it's not what, those are not the figures I think that we have. And again, we'll have figures that come out of the master plan. But I think the big difference there is we're looking at that, I assume that made some assumptions about using current infrastructure, especially at 90. And that is likely not the case.
So that these numbers are from the study are just not applicable or where did it come from?
I'll say a part of, you know, what we talked about last time with the limitations of doing these different projects in isolation was because we weren't integrating this, and to Allison's point, like waterfront infrastructure is a lot more than just, you know, adding putting a charging outlet or something like that. So I think my understanding is that feasibility study had was looking kind of a little bit more, with a narrower scope of it. It wasn't taking a full understanding of the pier conditions, in terms of sizing, what it would cost. So a lot of what has been done from the feasibility study is going to be integrated into it. So it's not necessarily lost, but will be one puzzle piece of the greater picture.
And I think the other part of that is that, what the numbers that we're talking about are going back to a master plan that is really reimagining the space for that it better serves the community. So if we were, that involves public access, there are other components. If we are going to, we're making this investment, we want to be making other investments in the site as well, at the same time.
And that's what we're a little, maybe stuck on.
Yeah.
With that, okay, Kate, your color, go ahead.
Well, I just have, I think something that would help frame this better, and Candace might understand what I'm saying as well. It's like if you have an old house and you're like, I want to upgrade my HVAC system to top of the line, but I have really bad ductwork and I have drafty windows and I have poor insulation. So even if you put in the top of the line thing, you have other stuff that makes it not really work well. So you have to do the project. So if you were to add shore power to the way the piers are now, it's possible that it could eventually fail or be offline because the piers may not be able to handle it in their current condition. Is that kind of what it is?
It's gonna happen.
It makes, I mean, piers
But
are in the
they're different steps.
1930s.
We're not talking about putting a full thing, that's the full thing at the end of the pier, right? The weight of it, you're saying, or something, but there's many steps to get.
Well, it's the general infrastructure. I mean, if the piers are, need to be fixed up and
Right.
other things,
But
there's
that's what
lots
we,
of.
but that's what the Jacobs study was. Right, anyway.
I guess the question though is,
One of the things have to be replaced. They can't be fixed up.
Yeah, they have to be replaced.
I guess that leads to Dave.
Yeah, to continue the homeowner analogy, is there a kind of extension cord solution in terms of a temporary backward solution, or would you absolutely
We
need
have a substation.
a substation?
There,
So-
we are talking about high voltage electrical loads here. So temporary in that is tough. But if there was a substation, could there be some way to do an extension cord for 8 months while the thing is being built? Is there something like that out there? That's certainly something we would explore, without a substation.
Well, you see those trailers all over bringing heat into buildings that have the boilers there, so.
I know, I think this question was asked last time about temporary, and again, we're having to bring in like a shore power provider to help. But we definitely talked to them and length about this, and we have been, because we're constantly asking them, they would love to sell us something to get shore power here. And so it's like, what can you possibly do as fast as you can possibly do it? We need that substation.
I mean, could there be a plan where you prioritize locating the substation, assuming that from there you'll have temporary distribution, and do the funding for the substation only? And I don't know, based on the master plan, are you like 80% confident of one location right now for the substation, and maybe the rest of the master plan could work around that? You see what I'm getting at, trying to take a
I think
bite
those are all
out.
the things we're also thinking about, is like, how can we keep the phasing of this to prioritize?
Well, shouldn't that be included in the master plan?
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So within 2 to 3 months,
I think
you
spring.
will come out with a plan that includes the possibility of a temporary solution for the shore power.
No. I think the part that we're talking about is that shore power is a huge piece of this master plan. Like when we're thinking about the future, it includes shore power. The point about a temporary solution.
A temporary solution.
Is where we need this master plan to understand what that even looks like. To Allison's point, a temporary solution is dependent on substations. We can't just all of a sudden build shore power station system without that set as the first step. So we won't have we're not going to be talking about like temporary versus long term, like we just want
But to be fair, what you're saying is, in its equivalency, we need to build a new airport before we can power it. So we're not gonna see shore power. You know, if it's, we have to go through a whole design phase, and we have to go through funding and then design, and then it's gotta be bid and built. We're not looking at anything for 5 to 10 years, no.
That's the problem.
That's what
Yeah.
well, it doesn't sound like
I think because.
there's another option to that, because it doesn't look like we're looking for it.
Well, right now, the things that there when you steps to this, and we are very focused on that, we want this as soon as possible, so, yeah, we can't say how many years right now, and I know that has been, very frustrating for us as well, but we're hoping that it's.
Well, this committee keeps, every individual that's talking, we keep saying, what about that parallel path? While we're doing this, why aren't we talking to Con Edison and making, we could be doing two things at once. You know, we're like smart people, we don't have to wait for this to be done, for that to be done, I would think, I don't know, I'm not a master planner, but the request that seems to be coming together is why aren't we working on a parallel path? We know this has to happen, regardless of what happens, so why can't we do it?
I think we would be in a lot of ways. I think that we would be working in parallel paths once we know what it is, once we finish this master plan and we're able to say, here's about the size of the substation, here's where it might go. And we have more funding information, then I think that's where we'll be working in parallel paths on the funding side.
And that can be the spring, it's just a couple of months away, correct?
Yeah.
So to be clear, is the master plan going to include the two paths, a short-term path and a long-term path, or no?
It will have the final long-term path.
Only.
Correct. And if there are opportunities, for example, that siding at the substation that Allison just described, right? If we know where that's going to go, there's no reason to wait until all the other infrastructure is in place to begin that planning process, right? But having certainty around the location of that substation is going to be key in the eyes of Con Ed, in the eyes of funders, et cetera.
But I think what this committee is saying is, tomorrow you should have lunch with Con Ed and find out where that substation is. You know, or where it should be.
Right, but I think that also has to, we can't install a substation now. And
No, we understand. It's just been very uninspiring, and again, I didn't want to get stuck on this, but now we have to be stuck on it because it's been very uninspiring with the EDC when it seems like it was COVID, right? There was downtime at that cruise terminal. This would have been a great time to research that area and to kind of see where we could go. And now, you know, I'm sure everyone knew at EDC that those piers were in not great shape. And then you come out with a Jacob study saying, your own study for 2 years, saying that this is what we're gonna do, we're getting shore power. Did no one at EDC know that the piers then were not in good shape? Now all of a sudden, it's like a light bulb came off, oh, the piers aren't in great shape. Like, do you know what I mean? It seems like you have this big press conference that you're doing this, and this. And then the next month, you're like, we're not doing it because the peers, you know, they can't handle it. Do you understand like the uninspiring?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, let me,
That's the point. Yeah, just one more quick one. It sounds like the substation is critical path for either a temporary or a permanent solution. Could you do two schedules? One that incorporates temporary distribution after the substation is in to get us power as soon as possible. And a second one that puts in the permanent infrastructure distribution after the substation goes in. Presumably the temporary one would be shorter. It might involve some, you know, wasted funds, but then every year that goes by with the pollution that we're subjected to is a cost too. Is that a possibility, and how soon could you get us critical path schedules for those two options?
I think we need to finish the master plan first.
By the nature of, you know, a schedule, it's a projection, it's not a guarantee. You already know the master plan will be completed in spring. You know, what is the soonest date by which you would be able to locate the substation. And working from that day forward, how soon feasibly could you have temporary distribution to the ships?
I want to be careful about, or we keep talking about temporary, and I think one, that is an idea that we would need to, we've not seen that happening other places. But one thing we know is that the very first step is a substation. I imagine that anything temporary would be a matter of months, not something that, I can imagine that from an electrical standpoint is something that really would exist for much longer than that. So we are really very focused on what is where do we put the substation, what is the informational power system here? Then what is that whole system?
Right, this is looking beyond the substation. We've got X amount of time to get to the substation that is established. Beyond that, there's a temporary solution feasibly, and there's a permanent solution. What's the difference between the time frame for a temporary feed and the permanent one? Are we looking at adding years to the project? Is it even worth talking about the temporary solution? And if we learn that it does save us a significant amount of time, I think we want to incorporate that as a master plan alternative.
Sorry, what do you mean by master plan?
Well, maybe not master plan, but as an alternative in terms of just looking at what's going to happen going forward. I think, it's important to have a sense of when we might achieve the goal. And by the nature of the critical path schedule, these are all the milestones along the way that are essential in sequence. What's the order of magnitude of time that we're looking at, and where can we find opportunities to shorten that? And I think unless we've got that in front of us, we haven't really begun to.
So for example, as an analogy for the Highline Park, the third phase is all around Hudson Yards. They couldn't build it because it was gonna get destroyed or changed because of whatever was gonna happen in Hudson Yards, but they raised the money and opened it to the public. They made it safe and made it work. And it was supposed to be a small number of years. It's still not settled. So a temporary solution has been in place for probably, it'll be a decade before that actually gets worked out to be finalized. And that's sort of like, is there something that can be done? Since we don't know how long it's gonna take before anything happens here.
Yeah, and I think that's the piece that we were talking about, like when we know this master plan, we know that long term, then we can see if there's other opportunities for other. So these are all things that we'll be looking about for sure. We just, I'm not sure.
Can we get off the short hour?
Yeah. I'm on the survey, I took the survey.
Okay, can I finish, do you mind if I finish my questions, and then we can go back on, okay. Can we get the Jacob study? We've been asking for the Jacob study.
I mean, the part of that and what we've been challenged, what we have been encountering as a challenge is like in isolation, it doesn't quite make sense. So it will be incorporated as part of this master planning process, as we mentioned. So I think master plan will be a better outlook to understand and digest from the short power study. It's not that we want to keep it away.
So you think it's obsolete now?
It's not that it's obsolete. I think it will make a lot more sense in context of everything else in the future. So I don't think it will be that useful on its own, right?
So we would need a foil.
If it was on, yes.
Ella mentioned the survey. I'm just going to channel our former board chair, Jeffrey Francois, because he knew this was coming up and we've been talking, made a big long list for me, which I won't go through. But I will quote him and saying, for starters, please, please, please scorch and blister the absolutely horrendous survey they sent out. I just want to say, I did take the survey. I did look at the survey. It was a mishmash of questions. It was talking so much about transportation and roadways, and it didn't have anything that, I agree with him, and it just didn't seem, maybe not to the extent he says, but that the survey wasn't very user friendly, and it seemed not to, I don't know who made the survey or if they had any connection to the neighborhood or knew the components of it, but, just FYI, it's, I think a few people have looked at it. Katie, were you the one who looked at, someone looked at it, the survey, someone else said it didn't have a lot of. Go ahead, Ellen, if you want
Well,
to.
I felt like it was sort of leading the witness, like I felt like as I was taking the survey, it was very clear, like shore power was not mentioned once in the whole thing, so that's what I care about. But like, I just had to put in the other comments as the last one. So I just, the so what of the answers that you're gonna get from those questions, I don't think are gonna be all that meaningful, so I do think that like the survey just needs to get redone, yeah.
Also, where is Ports of America, where do they fit in with this process of the master plan and the funding and all?
So John mentioned this, so they are one of the ones, when we're talking about technical experts, as the different stakeholders involved in this. As Josh mentioned, the technical experts in this situation are the cruise lines and operators, as they're the ones, you know, managing, on a day-to-day cruise operations. So they are part of the interview process.
Yeah, regular part of that.
So when Ports of America came to us, I think it must be a little over a year now, they were revamping the whole, what was it, was it 80 years? 90. They were revamping it at their own costs, and they said they were even putting shore power infrastructure at their cost. Is that all now gone away? That whole, are they waiting now for your master plan, or is there?
Waiting for the master plan. Make sure that.
So that whole,
Make sure that's the right.
okay, because they wanted a whole redo of that, and they were going to, I guess, foot the bill for most of that. Or a lot of it, according to them in their presentation. And they were gonna start, I think they said they were ready, they were 99% ready to go, or something, 90-something%. So now that's been put on hold, obviously, right, because of this master plan.
At the moment, that's on hold.
Okay.
For us to finish the master plan.
Okay, so is it, how much, maybe it's premature, how much, consultation has there been with, Hunter River Park Trust? And the connectivity of the, you know, the two ends there, well, really probably not the north end, but more the south end.
Yeah, one of the interviews that was held was with the Hudson River Park Trust and, now it's been some time, so I can't remember all the details of our conversation, but I think a lot of it was more about having the connectivity around it, and, you know, connection.
Yeah, they are very, very good with public planning, especially in that part, so it'd be, I mean, I think it would be a fruitful
Yeah,
cooperation.
yeah, I'd like to see a lot more integration, so it doesn't feel like two different things.
Yeah, that'd be great. Let's see. I think, so I think the only thing now left is, for our comment on the master plan process, which I guess would be here. We had a few things that were, I mean, we had a bunch of stuff, but I think our priorities, obviously shore power, but, was the service trucks. So the tractor trailers, we talked about, line up.
Yeah.
At night, and they line up on the highway, or right off the highway, but kind of adjacent to the highway. So is it possible in the master plan that all the services, the operations would be just condensed to not over, you know, spilling over?
Yeah.
That's one of that, I know that was one of our community board's priorities. Another one was, the spiral ramps that go up, can't hold obviously trucks or large size vehicles, which would. Are you thinking of actually demoing that? Like, are we talking that big of a scale of a renovation or no? And then we would put new ramps, so like the whole operations can be internalized, or?
It's definitely on the table.
Yeah, okay, because we would love those demos, so we can get, because you have huge parking areas up there.
Please, don't survey it by that moment.
Yeah, so that, I mean, that you
I'll
can.
be there, you don't have to be.
Okay, to get all the trucks up there, or whatever the service.
Well, but to be clear, the trucks that are, the big trucks that you're talking about are full of food.
Yes.
Provisions, right?
Right.
They enter that from the pier deck itself. So you would never bring those trucks up to then load the cruise ship.
But you could.
No,
Why?
the cruise, all the doors of the cruise ships were all.
No, but you load some out shaft or something, bring it down, just to get them off the, if you
I
wanna
think
get them off the.
incorporating everyone into, trying to mitigate what we call staging operation that we know
Yes.
has those spillover effects, definitely. Much more difficult to create a new system in which there's elevators and other things for bringing product up and down. So that's a challenge, it's the way the cruise ships are configured, it's the way the stevedores handle that product, it's a safer operation because it's such heavy product that it's at.
So you want it to sit lobby level and keep it there?
Absolutely.
Okay, but we get them, you could do that by hopefully getting them off the highway and.
Right, I think, as we think about some of the priorities, one of them is what's called the ground transportation area that a cruise terminal would feature. It would include accommodations and staging for, the provisioning trucks.
Okay, because that's a big, I know that's a big thing in our neighborhood, it's another element of environmental pollution and just congestion there. The other, can I ask you, who is calling the shots on open, is counterterrorism still calling the shots on opening that area, or is that wrong? We don't know, we've been talking with NYPD, they tell us it's counterterrorism, and they say it's EDC.
Which area we're talking about?
Just the gates that are there, that were there from 9/11.
I
From security.
believe that's not, security.
But from who? From you guys or
No.
from?
I am under the understanding that's a federal, security requirement, but.
Yeah, because I think we talked to Congressman Nadler's office and he referred us to the city, so maybe, we just have to figure out then. So obviously, and you mentioned this, thank you for mentioning this about openness to that area, and we know there has to be some security measures, but I guess since the time it's been closed from 9/11, security measures have obviously advanced greatly, that you don't need huge spaces to be, you're right, you don't want to come and touch a ship, like you would touch a plane, but there can be some sort of negotiation where that would be open, if not partially, even the view or something to the public, it's not just walled off, that was another one of our priority. Pier 92, which has been a thorn on this board side for a very long time. We asked originally for an element of a blue highway, or look into it possible. We don't know, what are the, have you guys, I think you guys said you were gonna put out an RFP for that, but is that no longer on the table, because it's gonna be now
So
into
we
the master
put
plan?
out an RFPI, which is different than an RFP, and that
Okay.
it's soliciting information from the industry about whatever they have.
What could be done, or what they need?
Or what is of interest, and so Pier 92 was one of those sites that really came out, as a place of interest for blue highways from a lot of companies, so we know there's a lot of interest from the private sector in this, so, that's definitely on the table.
So that's good news, I guess, right?
Yeah.
That it would align with something that maybe we would look or want to look at, look for, okay.
Is that part of the master plan study?
92 is.
Yeah.
92 is that, okay.
And then the last two things for the master plan, and I was there, so I think I mentioned them, but it's, and I'm channeling Brad, who is not here, dumping people on the highway, the onboarding and offboarding of people.
Yeah.
Like it just goes right, there's nowhere for them to go, there's a ton of people that get dumped onto the highway. And then also, the last thing is, the tangential element of the shuttles and public transit that go with that. We have hardly any of it.
Right, the extension of that infrastructure too, yeah.
Yeah, like just like either shuttles or city buses, I don't know, whatever the master plan or whatever the transportation people come up with. But those, I know those have all been, previously mentioned in whether it's a transportation committee or our committee or something, but anyway, those are clear in that, our priority, and I'm sure there are other nuances and little things, but those are the big news that you guys probably already have. Anyone else?
Yes. Don't forget my little dock. I really think it's important for us to have a small dock where dinghies can come in and you could charge for it if you wanted to for so many hours. But folks complain all the time that are cruising through here, that they have to anchor in and they don't have any way to get to the land.
Yeah, I think that happened, they shut something down, not our district, but the Upper West Side.
Yeah, the marina.
The submarina, that's been a big problem.
Yeah, but they're cheap to build. I mean, you buy them as floats and put them together. It's like an erector set or something. And
it wouldn't cost a lot to do, and I think that that's important for a port that wants to be an active port.
If we can maybe have that element, maybe by 92 or something, I don't know, but. Okay, anything else?
We put one in Provincetown, I think it cost us $5,000 for it or something.
Here, it'll cost 5 million, don't worry. No, maybe it costs like 5 million.
Believe me, any commercial thing that you do for government is gonna cost you more than it would for anything, any other fire.
You have to be able to get from water to. Land.
Anything else from anyone? No? Anyone from the public? Janine, is there anyone in the public here today to talk about this? Or more, do you have any?
No, there's no hand. No.
Thank you. Well, thanks, guys. I guess we'll talk about if we're gonna do a letter on this or not, but maybe just to memorialize what we said, but. Thank you. I think that you guys are really good
No, thank you.
at the planning meeting.
Hope to see you guys at the end of the month.
Oh, I also have flyers, here, if you wanna take a couple, put them in, I don't know, stories to go through, or whatever it is, I can, that's appreciated. We'll also be in the neighborhood making flyers up, so we're not.
And Tara, if you also want, we can also contact or connect you with the Hell's Kitchen Block Associations that are right there.
Yes, we have some emails.
Do you have them? Okay.
Yeah, but I'll.
Okay, because if you need that, we can do that too.
Yeah, for sure.
And are you on the LEAP NYC kiosks? I feel like.
I think actually, we were, but the survey up in the NYC kiosk, but we're.
Okay, really?
Pretty sure it's better, but also, yeah, well.
Who did this? I'm curious, who did the survey?
That was.
EDC?
Our company team, but EDC.
Is that easy to
We can,
tinker with?
yeah.
I don't know.
Happy to chat more about.
Yeah. Okay.
And also if there is any advertisement of the workshops themselves,
Yes, yeah, we're
Yeah.
putting up a big sign up in HRPT soon, and yeah, we'll also continue. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go on to our last agenda item, I should say, before all the new business. So I am going to pass it over to Katie Savage, and she will discuss and present. Janine, can you look at the two slides, the two paragraphs, I guess, there that I sent you for slides? On the DSNY, the new law for the proposed changes to the existing law.
Oh, yeah, you want me to pull it up? Sorry.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna let Katie take over and then she can. tell
Yeah, I
you
think it would be helpful to have it up there also.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
last Monday, DSNY issued, a proposed rule change. That would be, impacting, any entities that are engaged in cleaning of public spaces. This includes streets, sidewalks, curbs, gutters, public plazas, all of those areas. And, this is kind of similar to something that they had put out earlier last year, that said any entity receiving collection from the Department of Sanitation must use containers.
Hold on one second. Janine, I sent you a document. It's much bigger and this is about the public hearing. There was a document that described the law, the changes that I sent in my email.
You sent the email today?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, let me look it up.
Okay, thanks. Go ahead. Sorry, Katie, go ahead.
Let me just open this so I can read the verbiage. So, what they say their statement and basis of purpose is to clarify that any entity that performs or causes others to perform cleaning services such as manual sweeping and cleaning of sidewalks, public plazas, streets, curbs, and gutters, or emptying of public litter baskets for the purpose of supporting local businesses or communities may not place any amount of refuse or recycling within the vicinity of any public litter basket. So that essentially goes against the way all bid sanitation workers operate, supplemental sanitation workers paid for by discretionary funding, and also community cleanup organizations that do this for free. So ACE would be supplemental sanitation, that's paid for by our city council member. And they are engaged in these activities. They sweep the sidewalks, they empty litter baskets that are full. What the rule says that if those organizations or those entities want to leave bags for collection, they must have sealed containers to do so.
Are they providing the sealed containers?
No. So they describe the entities as business improvement districts, neighborhood associations, merchant associations, and any other non-governmental organizations.
So when Eric Botcher organized cleanup days, is that, you can't put it next to him?
No,
You can't.
so when you are walking in Hudson Yards Hell's Kitchen Alliance area and you see the guys sweeping up 9th Avenue and they have a big garbage can with them on wheels, when that bag fills up, this would make it illegal and punishable by a fine to the person who is doing the cleaning up, not necessarily their employer. They would receive a fine if they took that bag and put it next to a litter basket for collection.
And so what are they supposed to do with it?
They are supposed to provide sealed containers.
And where are they supposed to put the sealed containers? Okay, okay.
There's nothing that explains what any of that does.
So is it just not well thought out,
Well,
or
that's like-
what's their
It's-
objective?
Tell people
So-
you're
Okay, so,
back and
so,
forth with the
yeah,
DSNY.
so now, that's the overview of it, and as most of you know, I also run a all volunteer nonprofit that does community cleanups in the neighborhood. We've been doing this since 2020. So I have engaged with DSNY to get more clarity on what this is. I was told today by Josh Goodman, who's the Deputy Commissioner for Public Affairs and Customer Experience, that don't worry, this isn't gonna affect community cleanup groups, that's not the intention, and that we just want to prevent abandoned bags from being left by public litter baskets. It is already illegal to dump household or commercial material in a public litter basket. That is in the admin code, section title 16, which is sanitation, section 102 or 120, section 120E, because I looked it up earlier to email to Josh. Which states that you can't put it in. They could simply amend that to say in or around a public litter basket. But the verbiage of this is so expressly, it said no entity or organization, this is like the actual text of the proposed rule. No entity or organization acting under the direction of an entity shall be permitted to place any amount of refuse or recycling within the vicinity of any public litter basket placed by the department or at any other location, except in accordance with rules of the department relating to collection, which means providing any material placed out for collection by the department by an entity or organization acting under the direction of an entity must be placed in rigid receptacles with tight-fitting lids that do not exceed 55 gallons in size. So
So I think
it's just a little crazy.
the
honestly.
intention, they say, is to end the practice of abandoned trash. where
And like
people just-
illegal dumping.
Illegal dumping, and people just start putting their trash on the curb, not the curbside, the corners.
Yeah, by
near the
public
back.
litter baskets.
Right, so I think it's just a wording issue maybe, and maybe they can be more specific, but I will.
So there are a few other things in this because it mentioned business improvement districts. I reached out to the Garment District Alliance and HYHK. And this is something that they have been in discussion with DSNY for over the past year. Because it goes back to the whole, if you're an entity, the previous rule did not define what an entity was. And this now defines what an entity is. But the previous rule said any entity who receives collection from the Department of Sanitation must use rigid containers. So the bids were kind of pushing back on that. What does that mean for us? ACE was also pushing back on that. They were assured, don't worry, this isn't impacting you. And then, it sounds like immediately after that rule passed, they drafted a new rule, this rule. And I know that because I know someone in the mayor's office of operations who emailed this to me and said, hey, you know, we talked about that last rule. This came out right after, but I couldn't tell you until it was public. So here you go. And this seems to, despite what sanitation is saying, it seems to not be for that purpose. And my major concern is that they'll say it, but if the text goes through this way, then it's done. And what they say doesn't matter because this is the text, this is the rule. And there's a public hearing on February 10th. Comments can be submitted up until February 10th. And I really feel that if the goal is just to deal with abandoned bags, they can just make one small tweak to an existing rule of just saying, and again, I mean, the other thing, when they talk about abandoned bags, these aren't abandoned bags. These are entities that are doing a public benefit. And they even in their text about the purpose say something about, so the term entity, the definition of that is any business improvement district, merchant association, neighborhood association, or non-governmental organization performing the cleaning, blah, 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 for the purpose of supporting local business or communities. So to me, that's not talking about abandoned
No,
bags.
it's specifically saying.
It's specifically,
It's saying that you shouldn't do it.
yeah,
Or that
so,
you're not
so this is a situation where I don't wanna get caught in, you know, a city agency saying, oh, don't worry. The text goes through, and then what they said doesn't matter because it's not in writing. What is in writing is what matters.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, in theory, there is that like little exemption line that like sort of gives.
for
the
using
department-
containers.
Yeah, it effectively like, gives the department like blanket ability to write regulations. Could they put some of those exemptions in writing before they pass the rule? I mean, I think there's also the argument, like, should this exist in the first place, this shouldn't be a rule. But
Yeah, well, I mean,
Yeah, it's targeting
yeah,
specifically
Yes.
yeah.
community benefit groups.
Yeah, what's hard about it is because there's multiple levels. So you have the business improvement districts at the top. If you go in Times Square, you'll see a lot of areas where they have a whole bunch of rows of city bins that they use to store trash. And that is something they have done on their own reasoning because there's a lot of pedestrian traffic, they don't wanna have the bags out, rats, all of that. And that's fine. Hudson Yards by the park, they currently have containerization and they've had that since the park was created. The impacts would be on smaller bins that are in little commercial corridors, that don't have that same infrastructure to be able to do that. And then you also have the issue of ACE and the Doe Fund and those types of organizations. They're funded with discretionary funds by city council. So that funding is not guaranteed. Their routes are determined based on the city council members' discretion. And those are subject to change. There have been times where part of 9th Avenue, like 1 or 2 days is cut off and they divert the worker to an area of 8th Avenue to help because there's a problem. So it's not guaranteed. And if they were to get containers, where do they store the containers? How do they secure the containers? How do they identify that those containers are for public use? There's a lot of moving parts. And then when you come down to the lower levels, community organizations like block associations, community cleanup groups, we're volunteers. We don't have the infrastructure and it's a moving target. Like I could, on any given cleanup, we could collect 2 bags of trash. We can collect 10 bags of trash. How are we supposed to account for how many bins we needed for that? Where we store the bins? So I understand what they're trying to solve, but it seems like this is not the way to solve it, especially when there is already a regulation about it being illegal to place this type of refuse in a bin, and they can just add in the vicinity of a bin to that, and that would solve it all. But the wording of this
So
is
where would it
counterintuitive.
go? Where does it go? Now,
Where does it go now? You put it next to the corner
next
basket.
to the corner
So
basket.
when
So if you couldn't do that, where would you put it?
I wouldn't be able to put it anywhere, because the big issue is, when you're doing this type of street cleaning, you're not sorting recyclables.
No.
Everything's going in the trash because a lot of it's contaminated. You find bottles of urine. You're not gonna empty that and put it in recycling. So if you were to bring that back to your residential building and put it with the trash.
They'd be fine.
Exactly. So it's kind of like a no-win. And these community groups and business improvement groups and all of this stuff are collecting street litter that could end up washing into our sewer system and end up in our waterways. So it is
No,
a
we
huge.
definitely know the benefits of it.
Yeah,
And ironically, these bids and these community organizations are filling in and supplementing things that DSNY should be doing
in the first.
in the first place.
Yeah.
Do you recommend like we go on the record against this proposed rule change, or do you think there's an amendment to the language in terms of like changing the word entity? What does that mean? Should it be like individuals instead of entity? Like it's not, because those are the things that are gonna be abandoned, right? Like someone just dropping off their stuff. But at the same time, those rules already exist.
Or you're writing that, or specifically saying this does not include community.
Or something,
groups
but like, what do you think
Yeah.
is the
It
best?
just seems to target those groups.
Yeah, I think what's really difficult, because
Yeah.
to add another layer to this, you have the department's official nonprofit partner, the Sanitation Foundation. And they have a program right now called Adopt Your Spot, where individuals can sign up and say, hey, I have a volunteer, I think he's watching now, who signed up to clean 45th Street between 8th and 9th Avenue. They sent him a hat, they sent him a grabber, they sent him reusable gloves, they sent him trash bags. And they tell those folks, when you fill your bags, leave them next to a public litter basket for collection. That's an individual. So you can't really word it in that way.
Yeah.
I don't, because I have like a quasi conflict, I don't wanna give a recommendation of what I feel, I don't know, can I give a, I can? Well, I wouldn't be voting on it, okay.
No, but you're bringing your expertise.
So just say like what would happen if.
So I think I definitely don't think I can do that, because I can't vote on a letter. I would be present at all.
for a letter.
Okay.
I would think that, if the true goal of this proposed rule is to prevent illegal dumping of bags at public litter baskets, it can be better solved by amending the existing regulation against dumping inside the basket to include and the vicinity of. Because that, if that's truly what they're trying to solve, then that to me makes the most logical sense. Because the language, the text as written is very prohibitive and would make it such that volunteers would no longer have the autonomy to collect trash and do community service
Yeah.
to make things better.
So let me, before we go to a motion on the letter, Janine, is there anyone in the public who wants to speak on this? Or has a question? Or on the board?
Yeah, there's a hand up. Let me bring them over.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Does anyone have a question or further
Yeah, I mean,
comment?
can I just say, I don't think that's what they're trying to do. I think they're trying to get this trash, not, so they don't have to pick it up.
So from the perspective of the bids, who have been dealing with this for a while, there is a huge push by Department of Sanitation to make the bids responsible for not just containerizing their trash, but also transporting the trash to the garage instead of having DSNY collect it.
Yeah,
So that's a whole nother layer.
there's a lot of private.
But that seems like what they're getting at. They're sort of more in that direction than individuals dumping stuff on the.
Exactly. So that's
So they're
where,
not gonna respond to that. I
So-
think we should just be against this.
Not only should we against it, is I think it's an opportunity to once reiterate that's responsibility of the Department of Sanitation.
Yeah.
I
To
agree.
clean the street, right,
Exactly.
get the funding, get the equipment, get the labor, everything.
I say this,
pay our taxes,
I
yeah.
say this to Katie, and I always say, no disrespect to you, Katie, I wish your organization didn't exist.
Hey, I wish.
It's ridiculous that
I
she
don't
has
take up
to.
trash for free.
Yeah,
Like,
we
that's what I mean, it's ridiculous that she has to do this
We should
because
not be
DSNY
doing,
can't.
our taxpayers,
I mean-
our cities manage to clean the cities.
The difficult thing is, long ago, the city removed sidewalk cleaning and sidewalk sweeping from the purview of DSNY and put it on the property owners.
Which is a, yeah.
Which is, it's.
We should do that next
Its
meeting.
own thing, but this is essentially penalizing the organizations that are filling in that gap
Right.
and making it
Out of the goodness of
harder for them to.
So I think we're all in agreement for the most part. I think we can include all this in the letter. I know, did you have your hand up?
I just
Before we go, I
like
see.
to get a little bit more information on the bid piece. Would they, like, it sounds like this would likely, in many cases, prevent them, they would just discontinue them.
Yeah, and also, I mean, their sanitation services are meant to be a supplement. It's not something that they're supposed to be fully responsible for. And in talking with the Garment District, and HYHK, they've said in their discussions, DSNY has been non-negotiable. They are not open to any changing or differences. So to me personally, it's very disheartening that the response to the community cleanup groups, both from DSNY and from the Sanitation Foundation, has been, oh, don't worry, this won't impact you, this won't impact you. But
No,
we've
but
been
it's not
down this
written,
road
it's not
before.
written that way, but it's not written that way.
But
Yeah.
even if it didn't, I mean, if.
It's
if
very,
just
very
eliminated the
prohibitive
bids,
and an undue
like,
burden.
we benefit greatly from the bids trash pickup and we would like it
Yeah.
to continue. And if it threatens their ability to do that,
There'll
that's
be
bad
no-
for the community.
But which, by the way, we're double paying on everything.
Sure,
This should
yeah.
not. Unfortunately, they exist, and thank God they exist, but they shouldn't have to exist, and they're double dipping all the time. I resent it.
Yeah. And
Dale, I see your hand, go ahead.
just in our statement of district needs, one of the key things in the narrative is like just airing street trash that the bids help supplement, the community groups help supplement. It is a top track, like sanitation specific priority for the community that would likely either be greatly reduced or go away.
Yeah, I talk to my husband all the time. The worst thing is the street trash, like the
Yeah.
trash that are along the side, it's all over. And like Katie said, that is no longer a DSNY responsibility, which is, to me, blows my mind. I mean, when I was in Tokyo, there would be guys all the time, sweeping up and dumping, sweeping up. I mean, we don't have those resources. That's another.
But we supplement that with business
With
improvement
this,
districts,
right.
merchant associations, yeah.
Yes, well, in some areas,
Yeah,
not
True.
in all, it's
True.
very spotty. I
Yeah.
know now, but, Dale, I see your hand is up, go ahead.
Thank you. Excuse me, I just wanted to add to what Katie said, and I agree every word that she was saying. I volunteer for the Litter Legion in Hell's Kitchen, and I also volunteer as part of Adopt a Spot through the Sanitation Foundation. And their point of view on this, and I've chatted with a bunch of people, their point of view is that they keep saying this isn't going to affect us. They tell us when we're doing our individual cleanups that we can just dump our trash into a litter bin, at the end of the block or whatever you're doing. They say if you're doing a larger cleanup that we have to in advance notify them, and they will pick up trash in bags in up to 3 different spots. So that is basically what the Sanitation Foundation's point of view is that, this law is fine because it's not going to affect us because we can always contact them in advance, or the Department of Sanitation in advance, and have 3 different pickup spots. And of course, the problem with that is, when we're doing a cleanup, we don't always know where our drop-off spots are. And in Litter Legion, we don't have the resources to be dragging around 20 bags of trash and putting them in specific spots for the Department of Sanitation to pick them up. So, I understand their point of view, but it's ridiculous. And this is just it sounds like they want more trash on the streets and more rats. I mean, by the sounds of this. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you, Katie, for laying this out.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dale.
I do just want to add to Dale's point about scheduling the pickups. Well, yes, that is an option. You have to fill out the form 2 weeks in advance. You have to know the exact
Listen,
location.
it's okay, we get it, like, it's.
But also, public litter baskets are serviced at least once a day. So filling out this form or whatever, they have to reroute a truck and there's no guarantee when they're gonna pick it up, so I don't know what the difference is. Like, yes, I did a huge cleanup one March, we had like 60 bags of trash, and obviously with that, we knew there was gonna be a large volume, we planned ahead. But I'm not gonna make DSNY go out of their way for 2 bags. It
Yeah.
just
No,
doesn't make
it'll be in
sense.
The motion for the letter, I'm just gonna presume that we pass the motion because this is just a suggestion around the letter. I think we should stay away from just a suggestion, just what we presume, we think the motivation for this particular amendment was, but more so just like to really say, like, here are some concerns we have. We really love and want to support our organizations that collect the trash and don't want them to be penalizing from the messaging from this. It feels like it would be very a penalty or very just prohibitive for them to continue doing their work. Just, I don't know, I feel like when we start to assume negative intent,
Well, we could do it in the form of a question.
Yeah.
Like,
Okay.
we could say, it seems like this is, can you please clarify?
Or we're concerned
If
about.
it's, but yeah, we're concerned about, like you said, this, I mean, if there's a point that someone wants to include or not.
But they're checking in.
Wait, hold on,
until
Jennifer.
February 10th.
Until
Yeah, that's what I
February
was gonna
10th,
say.
yeah.
So
Yeah,
maybe
it's
we
not
don't
gonna get
have-
back to us in time. If it's
Yeah.
February 10th, and we need to make a more of a letter that's.
No, we
gets
have
this.
No, February 10th is a,
But we're gonna have to wait for them to respond.
no, we'll send a letter before.
Well, the letter would have to be voted out of full
It'll be
board,
vote, yeah. And that's
which
before-
early February, I think that's February 5th.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, but I mean, we could put questions if you like to,
We
We
can
need
say,
to voice
we
our-
question why.
yeah, like what, and then we could say, this is what we want this, and this. This is our public here, this is our contribution to the
Yeah.
public here.
I think it's just really hard because if you read the full text of the statement, it is actually very clear. It is not ambiguous in any way that they are specific, because they say for the purpose of
Yeah.
benefit.
No,
So
we're-
so
we're-
that's
Jennifer,
where
go ahead.
it's hard.
So when you were talking about 3 questions in the letter, one of the questions I had was because it's so unambiguous, we get asked what their plan was to pick up all the trash that the bids would no longer be picking up, like to address that.
They don't have one.
Just because, exactly, and that's why you asked the question.
Yeah, right,
Like,
exactly,
It
just
just
to-
points out, like,
Yes.
there's gonna be trash everywhere
Yeah.
if we're putting it in the form of a
And,
question.
and when the city looks dirty, everyone blames Department of Sanitation. This is totally against their own interests.
Yeah, it's.
There's so many points we can include, so David has a motion.
Motion for such a letter.
Anyone has a second, great, Katie, is it okay if you write the letter? And then-
Sure, I'm happy
Would you like
to write the letter. I already like heard half of it. Just on my own behalf.
And we can add all the points that everyone said, and you can always refer back to the tape. I have some notes, but I think you know what to say, and then we're all in agreement with that. So why don't we have a Roberta?
And like I don't know if it would be appropriate to have a board statement like during that.
Or what statement?
Like a board testimony during that hearing, if we have an official.
Yeah.
I think
Katie
the
could-
letter, and then also, I mean, I don't know, I do plan on attending the meeting. I don't know if, again, it's just all the overlapping things. Can I be there both on behalf of Litter Legion and on the board, or is that a
We
conflict?
can ask Jesse about the technicalities, but Janine, I don't know if you're listening.
I get no financial benefit out of any of this, so I don't think it's really a conflict.
But our letter, we can submit as written testimony, absolutely. Can we vote on this and we can go back to the other one? Everyone in agreement with this letter? Okay, unanimous,
Oh, and present not eligible, officially.
No, present eligible, abstaining, anyone, okay.
One of the things I hope the letter will include, Katie, is a list of the stakeholders, which you articulated a few moments ago. That's one of the
Yeah, I
very,
can list all the stakeholders within CB4.
thank you. Great job. I really appreciate you bringing this to our attention.
Yeah, that's good.
Thank you.
Second thing is, well, you know what, let's, since we're on letters, we'll do that. We really don't have that much older new business unless someone else said it, but I'm gonna bring up, why don't we, since we're on letters, the EDC presentation. If anyone has any comment on a letter, I'm guessing we might have a letter coming out of it, just to, excuse me, to reiterate what we want to see in the master plan, like we have before, like the trucks, or the shore power, the temporary, and then the, you know, whatever, servicing, the openness. But if there's anything, if you don't think that's warranted in a letter, we don't need a letter, but I'm hoping someone.
No, I think there should be letter, and I really want to push, I mean, out of everybody's mouth, saying the same thing. Let's not wait for this to do this, let's be doing this together, simultaneous parallel paths. I think that should be written, I don't know if it's been said before, but I think it should be, you know, an important part of the letter, along with everything else, just so that there's no mistaking how we feel about, don't wait to hear until we get here, because we're never gonna see the end.
Yeah.
Should we also ask for schedules showing the endpoint for a temporary solution and a permanent solution? Yes, so we know what we're talking about.
Well, what I heard though from was that there's no temporary solution in the marketplace. Like there's, I mean, I don't know if it just sounds like it would be really doesn't exist.
There's a substation there on 49th Street, which is, I don't know what its capabilities are, but I don't know if it has this, it could be used to, or with a slight upgrade, it could be utilized. We
It
don't
sounds
know
like they
that.
need to be separate because.
Oh,
it's
yes,
so
for the
much
long term,
work.
yeah, for the
No,
long
even
term.
in.
For the long term.
Yeah, well,
You can't
the
use
question
those
would
for
be
this for-
if within that substation facility, could they cordon off a section of the substation that's isolated from the main system
Short
to
term.
temporarily.
Short
be
term,
powered?
just one area at least or whatever, right, I mean, I don't know what's possible, but they should be thinking about it, and that, yes, that's definitely a new, you know, for the long term, but
Yeah.
this already exists.
Right, both the temporary and the permanent solution would require the substation. So they'd have the same schedule up to the installation of the substation, but theoretically, the temporary solution would have a shorter period after that to get us to our endpoint, which is probably ships versus the permanent one, and we don't even have a sense from them what either of those would be.
Right.
So-
Sorry.
So one of the things that they mentioned when everyone was saying temporary was that it seemed like in from their frame of reference, that meant like a few months. And that's why it wasn't possible, because she was saying that it's just a few months, but what if there's, like, we worded different, and we say like interim or something like. Because here's the long-term plan, but in the interim, for the whole way, until we get to that long-term plan, not a few months, not a year, but however long it takes. If we can make a plan as part of the master, because they kept saying, no, we have to wait for the master plan, but what if that interim piece is part of the master plan? Because we need the shore power sooner rather than later.
And I think they are always gonna balk at an interim solution because they have to raise the money to pay for an interim solution, which is why.
Right, but they could still estimate how long that
I'm just
fundraising
saying,
is going to take.
they'd rather just wait and do the permanent one because it's already a lot of fundraising that they have to do, but I don't think we should look and get rid of that. I think, because this is years and years and years before this thing is gonna be rebuilt and operational.
Yeah, that example.
We need an interim solution, and they're gonna have to raise money to do that, we can help it.
Yeah, so ask them to provide a schedule for the soonest possible interim solution and the soonest possible permanent one. With what the milestones are between here and there.
And even if they don't respond as we want them to, we'll be on record. But then
of course.
Yeah.
We should have them come back, to present on the master plan in the spring, like. we want
When
a
they
full
have, yeah.
briefing of.
I plan on going, it's January 28th. I plan on being there, I don't know if anyone else will, but it's kind of like more of a workshop-y type of thing than anything, but, go on.
Are you still planning to also request a portal?
So we could, I mean, they're not gonna give us first of all, they spent how many, whatever money they spent, million, whatever it was, I don't even know, I can find out. on this Jacob study that they kept touting for 2 years, and now it's, if they didn't say it was obsolete, it's pretty much close to, like, it's. But, that's why I think they won't give it to us. We've been asking, I think we asked in a letter officially. I think Janine asked, the office asked again officially, can we see this report that you keep talking about? And they won't give it, and I think now they won't, so we'll have to foil it. Well, I mean, a foil is really, someone has to go down, we have to put an application, someone has to sit there and look through it, so. Yeah,
So let's do that.
let's do it. You and me, we're going down there. But,
I'll pay for your coffee.
thanks. Anyone else, I mean, I took a lot of notes, but anyone else on, and I'm sure you guys can throw comments to me, I'll write it and throw comments to me, you know, throughout the next 2 weeks. I'll take the language that you guys suggested, looks good. With the intro, I like the interim better than temporary, because temporary seems very like, I don't want to say flimsy, but interim
I
seems.
just feel like it's easier to dismiss temporary,
Yes,
or
yes.
if we say interim and parallel and those type of.
Like interim means that there's gonna be a continuation of it moving forward, yeah, I like it.
Until such time, there's a permanent solution.
And does anyone have a motion on that letter?
Motion to write that letter.
Second? Okay, should we vote on that?
Yeah.
All in? Anyone present not eligible, abstaining, noes? Great, another unanimous letter. So, Janine, we have 2 letters coming out. I don't know if you can hear me, but we have 2 letters coming out. You will get them, one on one on master plan EDC and one on, a DSNY law change or whatever, proposed rule change. Hold on, one more thing. I guess that's it. All new business. There's only one thing I had to mention. And it was really more of just an announcement. So this Monday, January 13th, if you guys remember Hudson River Park came and they said they were gonna redo the esplanade between 39th Street and 44th. And that would include landscaping. I think there was some bike lane, walking lane, infrastructure, possibly renovation, but they are having their public meeting on the 13th.
And it's only one meeting and it's only in person.
Correct.
And I can't go because I have another meeting that night.
Yeah, I bet they'll come back to us because they came and they announced their intention of doing it. We didn't get into detail of what it should look like. They said they're gonna reach out, kind of like that, they're gonna reach out to the public, have the public workshop meeting. And then we can, they're very good usually with coming with us. So after they have that public workshop meeting, maybe they'll come to us and they can share with us what they gathered. And then we can comment on those.
I'm planning to go to that.
Yeah, I'm hoping to go if,
There's a NYCHA audit, Brad Miller's doing.
Yeah, it's at the same time. That one is virtual though, so.
Yeah.
You could actually go to the Hudson River Park meeting and on your phone watch.
Who wants to do that though?
Nothing.
I mean, I've done it, but.
I was in Albany.
Marty, do you have anything else for old or new business? I did some old business when we talked to Paul at Parks, but I don't know if you have some old or new business.
I don't have anything.
Okay, anyone else? Old, new business? No? Okay, motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Great,
Second.
thanks, guys. I say all the time in this committee.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year.